President Obama did today mark the one-year anniversary of signing the economic stimulus package into law.
We acted because failure to do so would have led to catastrophe. We acted because we had a larger responsibility than simply winning the next election. We had a responsibility to do what was right for the U.S. economy and for the American people. And 1 year later, it is largely thanks to the Recovery Act that a second depression is no longer a possibility. It's one of the main reasons the economy has gone from shrinking by 6% to growing at about 6%. Our work is far from over, but we have rescued this economy from the worst of this crisis.
Mr. Obama's event at the White House today was the latest in a week-long effort to tout the success of the stimulus 1 year in. Vice President Biden traveled to Michigan yesterday to tour 3 locations that had all received stimulus money. By the end of the week, administration officials say they will have visited 35 towns and cities across the country to highlight stimulus projects. President Obama himself on his way to Colorado and Nevada. Democrats clearly think they've got something to brag on here. But as the White House went into stimulus touting overdrive today, Republicans went on the attack. Number 2 House Republican Eric Cantor of Virginia blasting the stimulus as a failure.
The president, in tandem with Democrats in Congress, have pushed through a $787 billion bill full of pork barrel spending, government waste, and massive borrowing, cleverly called stimulus. We have offered alternatives to the out-of-control, big government Democrat agenda that unfortunately became law and has completely failed to create jobs.
Has completely failed to create jobs, he says. Let the record show that Mr. Cantor does not always feel this way. In April, Mr. Cantor publicly celebrated all of the jobs that would be created by the stimulus in his state, specifically by a stimulus-funded high-speed rail project.
We can create a lot of jobs. Again, the estimates of job creations are 85,000 to 160-some thousand jobs for the Commonwealth, most of that in this area.
So the stimulus is a complete job creation failure, except for the 160,000 or so jobs I just mentioned. It is one thing to say it doesn't create jobs. It's another thing to say it does create jobs. You cannot hold both of those positions at once, sir. And how about you, Paul Ryan, the top Republican budget guy in the House?
We can do better than this. This bill, this economic stimulus package, is unworthy of our new president's signature.
This is just a long spending wish list from every spending interest group that's out there. If you're going to go out and borrow $825 billion,
recraft it for me, Congressman Ryan.
This is not going to work, and that's what our concern is.
This is not going to work. This is not going to work. That's our concern. It's not going to work. It should be noted for the record that Mr. Ryan doesn't always think that, like in October, when he requested stimulus funding for his district that, in his words, quote, intends to place 1,000 workers in green jobs. It either creates jobs or it doesn't, sir. How about you, Sue Myrick of North Carolina?
The thing about the stimulus was it was billed as a job creator, right? You remember that? Why in the world shouldn't you keep your money and create your own jobs instead of sending it to the government?
Woo! 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 Amen. Job creator, job schmeator. As animated as Congresswoman Myrick appears to be about that belief, I want you to know she doesn't always think that way. Because when she's not riling up crowds about how useless the stimulus is, she's writing letters praising the stimulus as a, quote, critical step in bringing economic opportunities to my congressional district, saying the stimulus will, quote, lead to solar energy-related jobs in an area hard hit by unemployment. How about you, Gene Schmidt of Ohio? Gene Schmidt of Ohio proclaimed in November, quote, I did not believe that it would create the jobs that were promised. I take little pleasure in being correct. Sometimes she doesn't even think she is correct. Should be noted for the record, when not denouncing the stimulus as something that can't create jobs, Congresswoman Schmidt is writing letters admitting that, say, a project in her district funded, again, this is in her words, under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, that's the stimulus, quote, will not only save jobs, but create multiple jobs within southern Ohio. You can't have it both ways, Congresswoman. Which one is it? This isn't someone asking you if you want Coke or Pepsi and you say yes. You either get Coke or Pepsi, not both. Either you believe the stimulus creates jobs, which you admit in your home district, or you believe the stimulus does not create jobs, which you believe whenever there's a camera nearby or a minority whip or both. You can't simultaneously hold both positions unless you're a hypocrite. It is not just liberals like me who find this astounding. And it should probably also be noted for the record that Jean Schmidt doesn't care what liberals like me think about her. I'm quite sure of it. But look at the hard time that Jean Schmidt is getting about this hypocrisy on Fox News, of all places.
You railed against stimulus spending and dough, and you wanted a chunk of it at the time. So ultimately, that was rejected. But you still had
Yes, it was
right?
rejected. And, you know, Neil, let me add that when they made that request, I informed them that as a large critic of the stimulus, that my letter might do them more harm than good.
Nevertheless, can you understand, Congresswoman, how this raises some hackles because you had railed against this sort of thing?
There have been some hackles raised, and not just among the creepy commies like Rachel Maddow. On the same program, another Republican congressman, Jason Chaffetz, came to Jean Schmidt's attempted rescue. Mr. Chaffetz is one of these Republican young guns who gets a lot of TV time. You would think he would be a little more savvy about these things. But when he was asked directly, have you committed this same crime, sir? Have you raised these same hackles that Jean Schmidt has raised? Mr. Chaffetz attempted to squirrel away from his own embarrassing record.
Did constituents seek you out and say, could you get funding for me for this, and did you turn them down? Yes or no?
Well, in general, yes, I did turn them down.
Okay.
In general, that's the out there. Congressman Chaffetz's own hometown newspaper, the Salt Lake Tribune, is nailing him on this, pointing out that he signed on to a letter with Senator Orrin Hatch and Congressman Rob Bishop seeking $95 million in stimulus funds for the Provo River Water Users Association. Again, Jason Chaffetz probably does not care what liberals like me think about this hypocrisy. In fact, I would bet on it that he really doesn't care. But I bet that Jason Chaffetz does care what the Salt Lake Tribune cares about and what he gets nailed for on Fox News. And I would say that both of them have nailed him on this. I'm guessing also that Jason Chaffetz does care what principled conservatives think about his hypocrisy on an issue like this. Jason Chaffetz is scheduled to speak at the annual CPAC conference, the Conservative Political Action Committee conference that starts tomorrow in Washington. When you go there, Mr. Chaffetz, do you intend to explain to CPAC why you believe that the stimulus is going to do a lot of good in your district? And why you also believe that the stimulus does no good at all? Are you going to make that argument that you simultaneously hold both of those beliefs? CPAC is not the Republican Political Action Committee. It's the Conservative Political Action Committee. They are supposedly all about being principled on issues like spending. How's that going to go over for you, Jason Chaffetz? When some brave conservative asks you, do you think this policy works or do you think this policy doesn't work? Which is it? What are you going to say, and which really is it? How about you, Eric Cantor? You're on the agenda at CPAC, too. Mr. Cantor put out a statement today slamming the effect of the stimulus, saying flatly, quote, still no job creation. Mr. Cantor apparently hoping that that's what gets picked up, apparently hoping that conservative activists are too dumb, too simple-minded to notice that while he's trying to maintain that position in public, he's also maintaining the exact opposite position when he's home. He thinks you won't notice.
We can create a lot of jobs. Again, the estimates of job creations are 85,000 to 160-some thousand jobs for the Commonwealth, most of that in this area.
Democrats have a challenge right now. Democrats' challenge is convincing Americans that the stimulus is working. The advantage that Democrats have is, by all reputable measures, the stimulus is working. Republicans have an even bigger challenge. They have to convince their own base that one of their two faces on this issue is telling the truth. And then they have to remember which of their two faces is supposed to be trustworthy before which audience. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine. Chris, it's nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you too, Matt. Rachel.
Did you call me Matt?
I was about to call you Maddow for some reason. like we're hanging out in high school.
I would answer to Matt, Maddow, or Madam. I thought that was the other option. That's excellent. All right, Lamb Chop.
All right.
So CPAC kicks off tomorrow. Will Republicans like Eric Cantor and Jason Chaffetz and these guys, will they actually have to defend the stimulus hypocrisy in front of this conservative crowd, or do you think they won't get asked about it?
Well, I think they will. The CPAC is pretty managed, one should remember. And conservatives tend to be pretty much in the fall in line camp, just dispositionally. But I do think it is actually a test, a real genuine test of the independence of both CPAC, of the conservative movement, and this new, Tea Party phenomenon, which is, are you really committed to the principles of small government, or are you a tool of the Republican Party? And for all the talk about how independent they've been, so far, largely, they've been essentially a tool of the Republican Party. This is an issue where they can prove that they are genuinely, ideologically committed to what they say they're committed to and independent of the apparatus of the Republican Party.
That said, there's a bit of a trap here for Republicans because so many of them are implicated in this hypocrisy. Think Progress, I think, has done a lot of the legwork on this in terms of putting together local news reports of what people have done in their home districts and contrasting it with their national